Okay, so hopefully this thing's recording. A little follow-up to my video on IS threat within the United States, what people should do and how to be aware of it. One of the statements I made in that previous video, which nobody's disputed, is that in the event of a terrorist attack here in the United States, one of the things we need to look out for is intentional collateral damage, especially to individuals' rights, freedoms, collateral crimes that would take place in the midst of an attack. Now that's going to take a couple of different tacks. One is, ever since the movie American Sniper came out, it's become popular to be anti-Arab. So there's a risk of collateral damage in the form of attacks on Arab communities, or people might be perceived as Arab, such as that idiot who shut up a Sikh temple. So that's one of the possibilities of collateral damage. Also realize, just like that guy who shut up the Sikh temple, those attacks may be carried out with relatively low levels of competence and planning. So the chances of other collateral damage in the course of those types of events is entirely possible. You get somebody who decides they're going to randomly shoot maybe whoever sees wearing a burqa in New York City or something like that. There's going to be the possibility and likelihood that that's a mentally unstable individual who would also carry out, cause collateral damage in the course of that. Then we have collateral damage carried out by government agencies, which we've seen already. We've seen that throughout the course of the investigations from especially the DC sniper area, where for I think over a week they maintained that it was domestic, that it was a white racist group that somehow did this. It was a white racist group that was responsible, or perhaps when we saw the collateral damage done to people's reputations, when it was other investigations and inquiries and searches made, when the original claims of the Boston bombing were that it was a tax protest group. We shouldn't expect false conclusions to stop in the course of future events. The other thing, of course, is we have to look at the straight-up statistics, including the 9/11 attacks, that Americans are 8 times more likely to be killed by police in the United States than any sort of jihadi terrorist. In the event of a full-fledged jihad campaign within the United States, where you've got ISIS infiltrators or sympathizers carrying out attacks, we might see that ratio change. We might see it change to maybe 4 to 1. We are 4 times more likely to be killed by an American police officer than a jihadi terrorist, instead of 8 times more likely. Or maybe it could even become even more extreme. Maybe you're only twice as likely to be killed by the police as you are a jihadi. At that stage, you also have to look at, what direction these things are coming from and how to mitigate those threats. Now, I was being realistic in not monkey-wrenching investigations or events or something happening where the police are immediately responding to something. Otherwise, you'll become one of those people who is more than 8 times more likely to be killed by the police. We have to look at these things realistically. And in looking at them realistically, we need to say, okay, how can we mitigate these risks? Because we can't eliminate them. We're not in control of those. One of them is, if you don't want to be a suspect, don't act suspicious. Now, if they're carrying out actions based on lists of people or things you have no control over, and are still just determined to do what they do, then you have to make some very adult decisions. And some of those decisions may be based on patriotism, and what's best for the country, as opposed to personal survival. If you feel that type of point needs to be made, tell the world about it. Tell them why. Try to get your side of the story out. And it depends on how those situations take place. I'm not going to tell anybody out there that they need to watch their family executed because, somebody's just gone crazy over something. If you need to make a point with something, that's your business, but tell us why. And make it public, okay? I don't want a private message or a private email where it's kind of one of those damned if you don't, damned if you do, kind of forward it somewhere. I don't want to be put in that type of position. But the other side of this is that we would look at, what kind of security protocols can you put into place to make yourself the hard target or an unlikely target. Based on what I've seen, a lot of the jihad people, if they really hate somebody, they're not all that deterred by a hard target. But there are certain things that you would probably want to refrain from provocation. They are capable of carrying out intelligence operations. They are capable of finding people. They supposedly are mining social media looking for members of elite military units who they may know of, and trying to figure out what their stories are, trying to see if they can connect them with certain operations they may have done. There was generally ongoing threats against anybody who was a Navy SEAL, which gets us into some of the stories that Chris Kyle was saying. And the special operations community is very hush-hush about whether or not any of their people have been stalked. And again, when something like that does happen, there's going to be a cover story. One of the ones was back in 87, 88, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. It might have been a little before that. There was a accidental shooting down of an Iranian airliner by one of the U.S. Missile destroyer type ships in the Gulf. They shot down an Iranian Airbus airliner. A few years later, a van belonging to the family of the captain of that ship was firebombed in a Los Angeles area freeway. If we looked that up on Wikipedia, and I can put some links below, they would come up with a big elaborate story about how it was a former enlisted man who didn't like the captain, who resented not getting promoted, was made to be the fall guy on that. The Iranians seem to claim differently. A lot of Iranians would claim, no, that was revenge from one of the Iranian families, not necessarily the Iranian government, over the shooting down of the airliner. We don't know. What we do know is that in individual cases, sometimes if somebody was involved in some sort of an operation against a particular tribe, a particular group, a particular family, they may have come in, they may still be in possession of wealth or something, they could afford to put hits out on somebody. That type of thing could happen in the future, especially as things become much more consolidated in the IS, or al-Baghdadi takes over Baghdad, and they decide to offer their resources to gain favor with tribes or tribal leaders or financial leaders who have they have the resources to pay for that sort of thing. So there is probably some heightened danger if you're hanging out with Iraq or Afghanistan or war on terror veterans who may be targeted by some of these people. That's something to be aware of. If you're hanging out with these guys, they're a target. There's old laws in the United States which says if somebody's a target of a hit, the government's supposed to warn them. They're likely to get warned. If you're kind of on the edge of being an anti-government type person, then you're probably not going to get that warning. Or it would be very subtle and very vague, because they really would probably benefit more from the publicity of you being killed by the jihadis than, let's say, you winning the gunfight. Okay, had some background noise there we had to bypass. So I would reiterate, and the whole thing with IS and ISIS, if you are living a normal life in the United States and you have, a relatively competent self-security profile, again, the primary threats initially are them infighting with other Islamic extremists for dominance. Then, of course, there's the people who have provoked and taunted them, like the Charlie Hebdo people. They were constantly provoking and taunting the jihadi types. Don't be surprised if they answer at some point. Or, even somebody who aspires to be part of them or aspires to be respected or accepted by them would answer taunts, threats, and insults in some manner that gains them attention and notoriety among the people they choose to impress. Of course, the other thing would be hanging out with people who are a target, or if you're working in security with somebody or for somebody who's a target, then yeah, you'd be aware of that as one of the possible and relevant threats. And that would be something that you maybe want to deal with a little bit more specifically. For the rest of us, I think that one of the things is, not being attacked or damaged or becoming a collateral casualty of the counteraction of any kind of a jihad attack within the United States. Again, these things are going to be less common than common crime. Even if they triple the number of attacks they do, it's still less than common crime. It's still less than your gangbanger problems. It's a little bit. It would be significantly less than government abuse. Although we would say that with hindsight and more experience, the law enforcement people would become much more discriminant and knowledgeable as time goes on. And I think we're seeing that. I think we're seeing that being, there's a certain maturity level that goes with this as it kind of settles in on what people call the 30 Years' War. And we put that in perspective to how much money and resources you'll invest in something. I was recently a little bit critical of one of the kind of gun and gear and patriotism education guys online because he carried a knife and a backup gun and a tourniquet and all this other kind of, bat belt type stuff on a daily EDC basis, but no Leatherman tool. And I'm thinking, how useful is a person who doesn't carry a Leatherman tool, or maybe prefers a Gerber or a SOG or some other multi-tool? But I could imagine going anywhere without one of these in my pocket. So, we look at all of those as the factors. Even if the jihadis start to really amp up their operations, the greatest danger is going to be the collateral stuff, not necessarily the attack itself. You're unlikely to be there when it happens. It's likely to be on and over with in a hurry. It's not like they're an occupation force anywhere. And the main thing is to look out for, becoming a collateral casualty in the aftermath or something that's done in response to it.